Hello, friends, and welcome to today's Momentum Boost. I am your host, Adrienne Gold Davis, and I'm thrilled that you joined us today. And I'm grateful that we have an opportunity to do what we're doing because you're going to want to ask questions, and all you do is type it into the Q&A box, or you just type it into the chat box that's on the right. Because on today's Boost, we are so honored to welcome an extraordinary couple because they're going to discuss the upcoming COVID vaccine and the tireless journey that led to its development. Dr. Drew Weissman developed the modified RNA that was used in the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, and he'll help us understand, or at least me. And clinical psychologist Dr. Ellen Weissman, who's his wife and also a Momentum sister, is also a COVID-19 test subject. So folks, we are in the presence of scientific royalty. Dr. Drew Weissman is a professor of medicine at the University of Pennsylvania's Perelman School of Medicine. And Dr. Weissman's laboratory focuses on the study of RNA and innate immune system biology and the application of these findings to vaccine research, protein therapeutics, and gene therapy. Dr. Mary Ellen Weissman is a Harvard-trained psychologist who specializes in psychological and educational testing, psychotherapy, and consultation. And in addition to her private practice, she also served as the primary psychologist for the Department of State and was the director of the psychology department of a nonprofit institution in DC. These are royalty. Please welcome Dr. Weissman. Hi, guys.
Hi.
I am humbled to be here on the screen with you. And I have to say that I am not particularly scientifically literate. I have a lot of questions. So I'm going to ask you, and I ask you these questions to try and use words found in a standard Webster's dictionary. Okay, just for my behalf. Otherwise, I'm going to have to interrupt you and say, would you please tell me what that means? And as I was mentioning to you both earlier, it is such a joy to see, you guys have been splashed all over the front pages of newspapers around the world and here in Canada as well. And it's such a joy to see people celebrated, not for nothingness, but for some real serious benefit. And so again, we thank you. So I'm going to go to the first question. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, Drew, this one's for you. Can you explain in simple terms how a COVID-19 vaccine is going to work, and if you have any sense of when it's going to come out?
Sure. So the way vaccines work is the first step is to identify the pathogen, the virus, bacteria, whatever's causing the disease.
Mm-hmm.
Then to figure out which of the proteins from that pathogen you have to target with an immune response to get protection.
Okay.
So we know for the coronavirus, it's the spike protein. Yeah. That's the protein that binds to the surface of a cell and initiates the infection. If you make antibodies against that spike, it blocks the virus so it can infect your cells and it protects you from disease.
So you're dealing with the spike, not the actual virus, but the thing that makes it, powers it. Is that right?
Yeah, so we only target one protein on the entire virus. And that's important because it makes it impossible for somebody to get the infection from the vaccine.
Ah, well, that's interesting because, I remember when the flu vaccines came out and everybody said, oh, you're just going to get the flu from it. People get sick from it, but you're saying that that's not the case.
Well, there is a live flu vaccine that we give to kids, but it's attenuated. So it can't give them the disease.
What does attenuated mean? What does attenuated mean?
So attenuated means it's weakened.
Uh-huh.
It can't replicate well.
I see.
But for our vaccines and most vaccines out there, it's one protein. So it's impossible to get COVID-19 infection from the vaccine.
But this technology, wrong word, this science that you have uncovered, discovered, and applied here, is it a fairly new discovery?
Yeah, so it's really brand new. We've been working on it for 15 years, but all of that is development. over the past 5 years, people have gotten interested in making vaccines with it. So we've made vaccines to probably 30 different viruses, bacteria, pathogens, parasites. And when the sequence for COVID-19 came out, that day we started making COVID vaccines.
So Mary Ellen, you've been a test subject.
Yes.
Were you afraid to be part of that? I mean, obviously you trust your husband, he's not going to inject you
Right.
with dangerous, but what were your feelings about that? And have you had any effects, side effects?
My feelings were that I found out through the news that they were having significant trouble recruiting people of color for the trials. And so I said, Drew, I think I have an idea. He goes, don't go there. He didn't want me to make a mess. And I said, well, I want to call this couple that we know, the Stewarts. And I said, they're like elder statesmen, and I felt like they could help do some of the recruiting. And she got back to me, and we adore this family. And she says, I don't think I can sell it because so many people in the past have been misused in trials.
Wow.
I understood that. And I just said, without thinking, would it make a difference if me or Allie were in the trial? And she said, I can sell it. And I was like, okay. And so we did everything by the book. We only used their flyers, the whole thing. And Drew was very comfortable with us doing it when he realized, what. And then I don't know what happened, but 3 weeks later, the trial was filled. So I would like to give the Stewarts a little bit of credit there.
I think you should, but clearly that it was a vote of trust, to have you be part of it. And sometimes that emotional piece is what drives the train, which of course is important.
If Drew says it's fine, he doesn't have a lot of words. It's fine.
Isn't it nice to be able to trust somebody that way? Okay, so here's the next question. Are there any patients with a certain medical condition that shouldn't get the vaccine? Is it safe for a person with rheumatoid arthritis, with lupus, with metabolic syndrome, with hyperthyroid?
So we don't know yet. And part of it is that, so it isn't currently safe for kids because it hasn't been tested. Pfizer has gone down to 12-year-olds. Anything younger than that, we just don't know. And those studies have to be done. A really important question, is it safe in pregnant women? And we don't know that either. So these are all things that we're currently trying to figure out. We think it should be safe in just about everybody. So there are some vaccines that like viral vectors. So what that means is that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is a viral vector vaccine. They use an adenovirus, which is a common cold virus, and they stick the spike into that adenovirus. They give people a live virus. So those vaccines can't be used in immunosuppressed people with HIV, people with immune deficiencies, because the virus might be pathogenic in them. It might make them sick. As far as we know, RNA should be safe.
What is RNA? What does it stand for?
It's part of the genetic system. Everybody knows that our DNA contains all of the proteins, all of the instructions for making us and keeping us alive.
Okay.
The way a cell works is it uses RNA to copy pieces of the DNA, proteins in the DNA.
Okay.
And the RNA is then read by a machine that makes proteins. So it's the intermediate between the genetic code, the DNA, and protein production.
Okay. So I'm going to be honest with you. I don't understand the whole principle around the protein either, and I have no scientific background whatsoever. So I'm going to shift back to some of the questions that I think are anxiety provoking in some people. Somebody asked,
You should answer, can this vaccine affect your DNA? We get that question all the time.
okay, does this vaccine affect your DNA?
No, it cannot. The RNA never goes near the DNA. And if it did, there's nothing it would do to the DNA.
Wow. Okay. So that I understand. So are there any possible negative long-term side effects that might surface in people giving a vaccine, like infertility or autoimmune disease, that sort of thing?
So again, we don't know for sure because it's a brand new vaccine and it hasn't been given to a lot of people. Scientifically, there's no reason to think that any of those things can happen.
Okay, so when something is declared safe enough to give to the public, I guess there has to be a certain margin of acceptance that we believe it's safe. And I would imagine that level, in order to make it available to the public, is pretty scrupulous. So what do you see as the risk factor for somebody? And do you see that there is one? And how long do you think it's going to take till we can get it? Because I'm first in line behind your wife.
So there's a few different answers to that. One of them is that when we test a vaccine or a drug, it's given to tens of thousands of people. There's a phase after the drug is approved, which is called post-marketing,
Okay.
where that's when you really find out, do unusual side effects occur? And they're incredibly rare, but there's things like thalidomide. And thalidomide went through all of the clinical trials and was fine. And it wasn't until it went into lots of people that they saw there was a bad side effect.
See, that was my generation, and I had friends who were thalidomide children. So
Yeah.
that's really what freaks people out, I think.
So
Okay.
the issue there is that it's incredibly rare for those things to happen, but we really don't know until millions of people get the drug or the vaccine.
So you're being extremely honest about this. Do you think that the big pharmaceuticals will also, or is it going to be like at the end of a commercial, and this could cause, no, we don't know yet, right?
Yeah, I think the pharmaceuticals, especially now with all the political pressure that's been applied,
Right.
are very careful and very honest, and will tell people that they just don't know all of the potential side effects. Mechanistically, so scientifically, it's hard to imagine anything happening.
So Mary Ellen, I'm going to ask you something as a psychologist at this moment. Given that there is anxiety around the virus, that anxiety is ubiquitous anyway right now, because of all the changes that people are going through, many people view and greet this news with tremendous excitement. And for other people, it just provokes anxiety in general. What would you say to that?
I would say one of the things that binds anxiety is knowledge from reputable sources. Get out of the rabbit hole of all of these alternative kinds of things and get facts that have been documented by reputable sources. Right. And with that information, no one says you have to get the vaccine right away. You can have someone else get it and then talk to them about it. There's no guarantee that anything is going to be perfect. You just have to make the best decision you can with the information that you have at hand.
Well, this is very honest. And you're saying that fact finding loosens the protein bind of anxiety. Are you saying that more information kind of loosens that?
From reputable sources.
So I'm going to hit you up with a little psychological question too, Dr. Drew, and Mary Ellen, you can also weigh in on this.
Let me just interject.
Okay, go for it.
What the FDA and pharmaceutical companies and everybody does is a risk-benefit ratio.
Okay.
So the risk from this virus is upwards of 3% mortality. You balance that against the risk of the vaccine. And so far, there's been 0 adverse events from the vaccine. So now you're comparing 3% death to no adverse events at all. And that's a really easy decision to make.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So, earlier on I was mentioning, or you were actually saying as well, that it took, 14 years of development before you got to this place. So I have 2 questions for you. Number one, what were you developing this for originally? Because this is obviously pre-COVID-19, A, and B, what is it like to work on a project? And I think there's a psychological piece to this as well, and to work in the kind of work where you don't see immediate results, where you have to have a certain resolve, a certain tenacity, and where, very rarely is the scientist who invented this going to be on television with everybody clapping. You have to live in a certain anonymity and kind of a self-motivation. So tell us two things. Number one, how and why did this development of sequence start? How do you cope with 14 years of work on one thing?
Sure. So Katie Carico and I, she was my partner in research at Penn, started this work actually probably over 20 years ago. And when we first started this, our thoughts were that this could someday be a medicine useful for vaccines, for treatment of genetic deficiencies, and for editing the genome, for fixing genetic deficiencies.
Okay.
So we knew even back then when we first started that it had enormous potential. We have a project going on right now that's funded by the Gates Foundation, where we're developing a cure for sickle cell anemia. And what this involves is a simple injection of the modified RNA into people's veins, and that's it. So with something like that, you can go to Africa and treat 50 million people very easily.
Wow.
So there's enormous potential for what the modified RNA can do.
So when did you figure out that this thing that you were working on would be impactful and effective for COVID? What was there, like an epiphany, a moment of clarity, or what? What happens?
So we knew that it was effective for vaccines from the very beginning, because we've been working on vaccines for 5 years. And in every model system we do, we get close to 100% protection.
Gee.
So we knew that it was a fantastic vaccine. We also, so back in December, January, when we first started hearing about Wuhan, China, and this new respiratory syndrome, we knew that that was a big problem and that RNA was probably the best vaccine to use against it. So the day the sequence came out, we started making the vaccine.
Oh, man.
And China provide the sequence that kind of gets lost in the translation.
What do you mean, Mary Ellen?
Yeah, so it would have taken us months to figure out what virus was causing that respiratory syndrome. China, the minute they had it, they announced, this is the virus, this is the sequence of the virus, and that's how you make an RNA vaccine.
So that was never publicized, but that's important.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is important. I mean, truly, this is, from what I've read, it's a very unique time in the world of science where people are working together. There's a unity without uniformity in this, in a desire to fix this, which is very in line with our Jewish values to a great extent. But to go back for a moment to the ability to work on something for such a long time where you don't see, immediate gratification, if you will, for what you're working on. Is there a particular character trait, Drew, Mary Ellen?
He builds rooms onto our homes. When each of the houses we had, he built rooms to think. We had beautiful outdoor porches.
Really? So you're saying it's thinking, it's about being able to sit with something.
It's part of it is distraction, part of it is thinking about it, thinking how to solve problems, and that's really what I do.
Yeah.
You can just see him sitting on the beach and he's just staring ahead and he's thinking about something.
Oh, the power of an introvert. My goodness. We need them. Okay, so I'm going to give you some more questions if you don't mind. Do you see this vaccine as a one-time use or something potentially like a flu vaccine, something we'll need to take every year? And on that note, do you both take a flu vaccine?
Yeah, so we both and all of our kids take flu vaccines. We don't know yet. So there's a couple of variables.
Okay.
The first is how long what's the durability? So how long do the antibodies last? For flu, the antibodies usually don't last more than a year. For smallpox, they last your entire life. We think that with the RNA vaccine, they should last a long time. So you won't have to get boosted very often, if at all. But there's actually a bigger issue.
What's
And
that?
that's, we've had 3 coronavirus epidemics in the past 20 years. There was the first SARS, MERS, and then COVID-19. It would be foolish to think we're not going to have more.
Huh.
So what my lab with others have been working on is what we call a pan-coronavirus vaccine.
Okay.
And this is a vaccine that will prevent the next coronavirus from infecting people. And that way the vaccine will be ready to give out the first time somebody develops a new respiratory syndrome wherever in the world, and prevent this past year of, of economic and social turmoil.
Wow. So, there's a question here by Stephen Gadol. What percentage of the US population has to be vaccinated to end the pandemic, given that not everyone will get vaccinated?
So Steve and I were residents together at the BI. The current numbers are probably about 70% of the US population needs to be vaccinated to prevent transmission and to get rid of this virus.
Okay, what does herd mentality mean?
That was why the herd immunity was a scary idea.
The herd mentality was for you, Mary Ellen. It's a psychological thing. What is the herd immunity on both levels? I'd be curious to know.
It's a herd immunity, which one of President Trump's advisors wanted to use, is where 70, 80% of the population gets infected with the virus. And that develops what's called herd immunity. And that's how you prevent, once you've got herd immunity, the virus can't spread anymore and goes away. The problem is that if there's 340 million people in the US, 80% of them get infected and 3% die. That's 10 million people.
Ooh, these are philosophical questions as well, not just political and scientific. They open up, all kinds of other areas. Another question here, there's so many of them. Somebody said, Drew is a genius and he and his co-researcher will likely get the Nobel Prize for this game-changing discovery. Okay, here from Donna Haas, I have an autoimmune disease, multiple sclerosis. Will the vaccine trigger my immune system that I get so much that I get a MS relapse?
So it hasn't been given to MS patients yet. There's no reason to think. So it's been given to 40,000 people so far, and there has been no adverse events, no systemic events, no autoimmune diseases have been stimulated. I would assume that a couple of those people might have had MS, but we don't know. There's no reason to think because we're only making an immune response to the spike protein. And MS is usually an immune response to myelin. So I can't say no for sure because I just don't know, but I can't imagine how it would happen.
Okay, any advice for staying physically healthy and mentally strong as we make our way through what's going to be a very difficult winter? I'll let you start with that, Mary Ellen, since you handle that part of the head.
What I did originally was when the pandemic started, I was watching cooking shows and playing solitaire and being very upset with myself for doing that. Mm-hmm. And then I decided I didn't want to be upset every night by what I did. So I was going to inundate myself with it till I was done with it. And then I was done. After that, I started thinking about when I was young, what things did I like to do? And I was like, I like to play the piano. Well, that's possible still. And what can you do with that? Then I find out a cousin is teaching piano lessons virtually. And then my uncle wants us to play a concert for him. So you have to kind of embrace an opportunity and see where the universe takes you with it instead of just sitting still.
So, but first you can eat the entire box of donuts, right? Like inundate yourself.
I think you need to do it until you're done.
I'm not done yet. I've been trying for months. I still want those donuts.
And that's under the assumption that people are kind of generally healthy and that this is a lousy time.
Yeah, okay. All right. And Dr. Drew, what about from a physical perspective? What should we be doing to get through this winter?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a clinician, and to me, the most important thing is we have to protect each other.
Huh.
So, resume as much of your normal life as you can, as long as you're protecting other people, as long as you're wearing a face mask, as long as you're not congregating inside. That there are things that Tony Fauci and others have said that these are required to keep the epidemic under control. And the problem is a lot of the United States has grown tired of this and has given up. And that's why we're at such a huge surge right now, where our hospitals are getting overwhelmed. We're not talking about 10 years. We're talking, at most another 6 months. But if people will do these things, if they'll wear masks, if they'll avoid indoor gatherings, we'll keep the epidemic under control and the vaccine will work.
Mary Ellen, what do you think the psychology is behind COVID fatigue and rule keeping fatigue? What do you think is going on in people's minds that makes them just, I can't do this?
I think it won't happen to me syndrome, or that they won't, how could they give it to me because they're a relative? Or, and I remember having to go through with someone, if you get sick, we can't help you. You will be in the hospital by yourself. If you die, you will have a Zoom funeral. Do you understand these things? This affects you, not some abstract you.
Right.
So I think sometimes you just have to be very clear, like, Drew and I can't go help you if you're sick, even though we would love to, and we often do. We can't do that right now.
There's so much.
Drew hasn't had the vaccine yet.
Really? There's so much dissonance. Okay. When someone gets the vaccine and then they stop wearing a mask in a public place, how can those that haven't received the vaccine feel safe?
You can't. I go to physical therapy and I wear a mask because I don't want other people to feel uncomfortable. And believe me, I would much prefer not to wear it. But it's just not a nice, if you feel part of a community, you want everyone to feel safe. So you wear it till you don't.
The other part of this is that so what we know from the clinical trials is that the vaccine prevents disease and prevents severe disease. We don't know yet whether it prevents transmission. So it's still possible that somebody could be infected, not be sick, but still be able to transmit. I doubt that's happening, but until I'm sure that it's not happening, people need to wear masks.
There is a Midrash, just for a little Jewish perspective, that is written about two people in a rowboat, and one of them starts sawing right underneath where he's sitting, right? And the other guy says, "What the heck do you think you're doing?" And he says, it's okay, I'm sawing just underneath my own seat. So, this mentality that what I do doesn't infect or affect or effect anyone else is a conundrum that thousands of years ago we were writing about as the Jewish people. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance and a lot of, this is not up to me. What message, this message that you're giving, where the masks that keep the social distancing, don't congregate inside with people. And yet I think that we see that the resistance to it is profound. This is a personal problem, a personality problem. Someone just asked, will people have any immunity after the first dose or not until after the second one?
So you need 2 doses to be protected. We don't know. There is a little bit of immunity. It's probably not enough to protect, but we don't know because the trials were done with 2 injections.
I see.
And the second shot is where people usually feel the side effects, if you're going to have any.
What are they? What did you get? What were your side effects?
I had a sore arm both times, which was neither here nor there.
Right.
I was like, Drew, my arm's sore. And then I realized it really wasn't as sore as I thought it was. And my younger daughter, the second shot, she just didn't feel good that night. And the next morning she slept in. And then she got up around 12 and went to work and she was fine. But she felt a little flu-like, I guess would be the right thing.
And is that true for both the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine? Is it going to be the
Yeah,
same?
they're both the same adverse events.
Okay, and when do you figure it's going to be available to the general public?
Yeah, so the first step is to get the FDA to approve it, which they'll hopefully do soon.
What does soon mean? What does soon mean?
Well, any day now.
Oh, okay.
I think the Pfizer is going in this week. The Moderna is going in right afterwards. The date that I'm hearing is probably around December 11th. They'll start to distribute the vaccine.
Okay.
It's going to go to high-risk frontline medical workers and nursing home residents first.
Okay.
That we're talking, there's over 7 billion people in the world, so that's 14 billion doses. That's a lot of vaccine to make. So it's going to take a while for everybody in the United States and in the world to get the vaccine. We're hoping by the middle of next year, everybody who wants to be immunized will be.
You mean summer of 2021?
Yeah. In the United States. The rest of the world will be later on.
So how do we stop this misinformation that is eroding public trust on this vaccine? What do you think?
I don't know. I'm a scientist, so I've always believed in science, and I brush off people's crazy ideas and try and convince them with data. But if they don't listen, I don't know how you make them listen.
Okay, another question. If you've had the virus and you have antibodies, should you get the vaccine anyway?
So yes, part of the issue is that some researchers find that the antibody response after infection isn't very durable. It doesn't last very long.
Uh-huh.
When that antibody response drops too low, you can get infected again.
I see. And I guess getting affected again in an already weakened system might be a really scary thing to have happen.
It could be. We just don't know.
There is 3 to 4 weeks between each shot.
3 to 4 weeks. So there's an end in sight. We are looking towards the horizon of at least the beginnings of, you must feel, this is a personal question. Obviously, it's probably not something that you're accustomed to be asking or asked, but I have to ask you both. How do you feel, Dr. Drew, Dr. Mary Ellen? How do you feel emotionally?
I mean, I'm incredibly excited because this has been a lifetime of work, and it's everybody wants their work to be appreciated and to accomplish something. My work is now going to help stop this pandemic, so that it's a fantastic feeling.
Oh, I'm so glad, because Judaism teaches us if you save one person, you save an entire world. And look at all the worlds you're saving. Mary Ellen, anything you'd like to share before we go?
No, I mean, I want to thank him for doing this boost. And, I'm thrilled for my husband. I'm thrilled for our family. It's been a really joyous time. And I'm just proud of him.
Oh, may the Almighty bless both of you with good health, long life, and continued capacity to pursue the incredible depth of interest and wisdom and knowledge you both have. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Please. I mean, wow. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne.
Whoa. Oh, man. Okay. I'm just like pretty blown away. Thank you both again for sharing your expertise and for everything you're doing for our world. And this conversation has been fascinating, and I'm really sorry to all of the many questions and comments that didn't get answered. There were so many, but we hope we'll have a chance again in the future to do this. But this Wednesday, Oh no, it's Friday rather. What am I talking about? Today's Wednesday, Friday. We're talking tahini with Amy Zeidelman. She's a tahini expert. She's a genius. She is the co-founder of Soom Foods. She's the author of the Tahini Table, Go Beyond Hummus, with 100 recipes for every meal. And you know what? This is a worthy, important thing about going forward into this winter. Eating healthily makes such a huge difference. And she's going to join us, Amy, for a delightful cooking demo. She's going to share the versatility of our favorite Israeli sesame paste and some of the ways that tahini can brighten up your Shabbat table. And this coming December 6th to the 8th, we're hosting our first virtual conference. There's hundreds of people already signed up. It's called Action Con, Unmasking Your Superpower to Mend the World. So you'll want to revitalize your soul with the best of momentum and momentum boosts, including celebrity keynotes, inspiring talks with top Jewish educators, intimate coaching sessions, and breakouts that will enable you to put what you're learning to use. It's the most important part. There's so much more, and it's only $36 for all 3 days. So click the link in the chat and register now. But from me, Adrienne Gold Davis, and from all of us at Momentum, remember that, as the Talmud says, the highest form of wisdom is kindness. See you soon.